This is Summer with Richard and Judy, exclusive to WHSmith.
Judy, listen very carefully. I will say this only once.
I can but live in hope.
We are off to France and the Second World War. You think you can handle it?
The Richard and Judy Book Club download, yours to keep.
Simon Mawer's last novel, The Glass Room, was shortlisted for the Booker Prize in 2009.
In The Girl Who Fell from the Sky, we think he struck gold again. Here's what happened when we caught up with Simon. So The Girl Who Fell from the Sky, the girl in question being Marian, half French, half English, absolutely ravishingly beautiful, very young, and intensely brave and courageous, and the creation of Simon Mawer. Tell us about Marian, because although she's a fictional character, she's pretty much an amalgam of these extraordinary young women who went behind German lines in occupied France and other countries in the last war as spies, and just took the most extraordinary risks with their lives.
Yes, they're obviously remarkable people. And in a sense, she's an amalgam, except that she is my character.
Yeah.
I think some elements of the story I've borrowed, just to give the sort of authenticity.
Sure.
Yeah.
But basically, she's my character. And you know, you said that she was beautiful, and she's not described as beautiful anywhere in the
Yes, and you're just fantasising.
which is an interesting point.
Well, would you? Okay, I accept you're right. There is no bold descriptive passage of her flashing eyes and all the rest of it, but she is beautiful, isn't she?
I think she's attractive.
That'll do.
In a half French, half British way.
Well, tell
Yes.
us all about her and how she's drawn into this world of espionage and danger.
Yeah, well, I've always been interested in this whole business. And actually that's a personal thing in that my mother, when she was serving during the war, 1943, she actually served with, I say a girl because she was 19 years old at the time, who was recruited by SOE.
Special Operations Executive.
Right. And this girl was half French, half English.
Yeah.
And was one of these people, 39 in total, who were recruited, females who were
All
recruited.
women.
39 women.
Yeah. Why women? I mean.
It was very interesting. I mean, this actually got as far as Churchill.
Right.
There were questions raised in the House during the war when it got out that women were being recruited.
Yeah.
Because it was considered completely wrong. Obviously, there were women serving all over the place, but not in actual sort of frontline operations in any way.
Is that because of the consequences that would befall them if they were unmasked by the Nazis? The almost certainty of torture and execution and all that.
I think it was more a sort of perception of the fact that women shouldn't be fighting.
Yeah.
I think it's that sort of thing rather than they are going to suffer any more
I see.
at the hands.
And Marianne, like all of them, the real women, they are taught to fight. I mean, she went up to these extraordinary bases up in the north of Scotland.
Yes.
And what kind of things were they trained how to do?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's actually the origin of the outward bound system. Yeah, once you'd done all this training, you'd trained all these people in the west coast of Scotland, around Arisaig, which was a completely closed area. Closed to civilians. The locals were, told, you've got to keep quiet. Well, of course, you tell a West Coast Scot to keep quiet, and he says, we don't say anything.
No, they don't say anything anyway. Yeah.
And the sort of instructors after the war thought, what can we do? Well, it's very good character training, and they morphed into the outward bound movement.
My older brother did the outward bound thing.
But back in the day, just to get to the question there, what kind of things were they teaching these young women to do?
They were teaching them the sort of physical things. I mean, route marching, assault course.
Garrotting.
They also taught them unarmed combat, armed combat, the pistol, all weapons actually.
So just to take this character, I want to get a sense of what she was capable of and what they were capable of. Here's me as a soft, middle-aged, unmilitarily trained middle-class bloke. If I got into a fight with one of them, presumably they would have the best of me within 3 seconds.
Possibly, Yes, theoretically, yes.
Yeah.
They were taught very nasty fighting, actually, yes.
Yeah.
The sort of, well, you can imagine the sorts of things.
I can see maybe why they wanted to recruit women, but what sort of women would it be who wanted to be recruited?
There was a tremendous variety.
Yeah.
And language was the prime thing,
Right.
because of course the idea was that you didn't get into a fight.
No.
You were working
Behind
undercover,
enemy
you were
yeah.
working in
Yeah.
a clandestine sort of thing. And some of them were seemed to be extraordinarily unsuited.
Yeah.
I haven't got time perhaps to go into individual cases. I mean, Noor Inayat Khan is a famous example. People have criticised the SOE people for ever having sent her. She
Right.
actually turned into one of the most courageous, but she was a small, slight, half Indian girl, and I can't imagine that she was particularly effective in unarmed combat.
Where did these young women, we'll move on to the plot in a second, but where did they get their courage from? Because, I mean, Marian, she's, hence the title, The Girl Who Fell from the Sky, she's parachuted into France in the pitch darkness and begins her mission. Let's move on to the plot a bit. It's a great storyline. She has to get to Paris and she has to contact a physicist who she knows from childhood she once had a girlish crush on, because he's heavily involved in the kind of research that could lead the Nazis to getting the atomic bomb before the British and the Americans. So everything hangs on this. It's terribly important.
And it's also true.
And it's true,
I mean,
absolutely.
in that the French were in that position.
Yes, absolutely. So both sides were, the good and the baddies were rushing to get the bomb. And this is part of a mission to stop the Germans from doing that. So the risks that she runs are phenomenal. Where do they get their coolness, not under fire, but under pressure from, under questioning, under false papers being examined by gun-toting guards? Well, they were so cool and collected.
Yes, I don't know. I think you have to put yourself... I mean, what I try and do in writing the book, and this is, I think, where fiction actually has it over the factual books that have been written about these people.
Right.
In the non-fiction books, whoever it is writing says, she did this, this, and this.
Yeah.
A fiction writer tries to convey what it was like in a way that non-fiction won't.
Yes, you do that very well.
Just simply the fear, but it's the sort of, part of it is the sort of stage fright fear. And I remember the time that I smuggled something through the customs, which was an engagement ring for a girl I never married in the end. But I can remember the feeling of knowing that I was going through customs. That's when they had customs. With this ring that I shouldn't have been bringing into Britain.
Yes,
and thinking, and actually enjoying it.
Yes.
You also say, don't you, that you went to boarding school and you thought that was a very good way to develop a secretive nature, which to sort of know how to keep a secret to yourself when you're living in such an exposed way, and that you think that was an excellent training for a fiction writer.
Yes, I do, yes. You have to develop an inner world.
Yeah.
I have to tell you that my father just missed the war because he was just too young. But he went to public school, and he said the same. He said that going into national service in the RAF straight afterwards, it was a piece of cake compared to being in boarding school. And here's something else. One of the characters in your book is based, well, he's a real-life character, Colonel Buckmaster, who actually ran the SOE, the Special Operations, invented it, really.
French section.
The French section. My dad worked for him. Not in the SOE, but much later on, after the war, Buckmaster, you may not know this, he went to become head of public relations at Ford of Britain.
Yes, well, he worked for Ford in France before the war.
Ah, did he? That was was that the reason? And my dad used to go and work for Colonel Buckmaster every morning. Yes, he was a press officer. So I was fascinated to read him.
Yeah, well, he's briefly mentioned in the book,
yes.
Buckmaster. He's a sort of figure who has a rather sort of stiff conversation with her and that sort of thing. He is a very interesting person, extraordinarily interesting.
Well, many congratulations on writing a gripping book. You have a wonderful endorsement on the front cover of the paperback from Alan Massey, the Scotsman, who says, as good as Le Carré, if you read one book this year, make it this.
She sits with her feet out through the hole, in the slipstream, like sitting on a rock with your feet in the water, the current pulling at them. Benoit is right behind her. She can feel him against the bulk of her parachute pack, as though the pack has become a sensitive extension of her own body. She says a prayer, a baby prayer pulled out of childhood memory, but nevertheless a prayer, and therefore a sign of weakness. God, please look after me. Which means, perhaps, Father, look after me, or Maman, look after me. But whatever it means, she doesn't want any sign of weakness now. Not at this moment of deliverance, with the slipstream rushing past her and the void beneath, while the dispatcher gives her a nod that's meant to inspire confidence, but only brings with it the horror of superstition that you must never congratulate yourself, never applaud, never even wish anyone good luck. Merde alors. That was all you ever said. Merde alors, she thinks. A prayer of a kind, as the red light blinks off, and the green comes on, and the dispatcher shouts, "Go!" and there's his hand on her back, and she lets go, plunging from the rough comfort of the fuselage into the raging darkness over France. It's not actually too much of a problem coming up with ideas, because a book takes about 2 years to write, which means you've got to get one good idea every 2 years. And that's not actually, beyond the wit of man, I don't think. Once you've got the idea, you have to work on it, of course. And that's what takes the time. Oh, goodness, my routine is not anything well organised. It's just when I'm at home, I'm always writing, which sounds dreadfully dull. I've never been aware of having writer's block, but one does get stuck. And I'm not sure that that's what writer's block is. I can always write. It's just that it's not necessarily going to be leading the novel in the right direction, and therefore one can spend a lot of time going round in circles. Yes, my first novel was published, I think, in 1989. And until that moment, I thought that the thing I really wanted was to have a novel published. And once I'd got a novel published, I realised that that wasn't the thing I really wanted. And I think the thing that one really wants always remains out of reach, probably. It was a great moment. It was a very satisfying moment, slightly ruined for me by the fact that both my parents had died, and therefore they never saw their wastrel son, who always said he wanted to be a novelist, actually being one.
From an author of a number of great books, The Girl Who Fell from the Sky makes our list as well worth a read. If you want to get your hands on Simon's latest novel, make the most of great offers and extra bits at the back when you buy online or in store with WHSmith.
I have to say, I thought the way that he encapsulated the courage of these young women, who this character was based on, these real people during the Second World War, who agreed to be trained basically to become killers and then to be dropped in occupied France and Belgium and Holland and other parts of Nazi-dominated Europe to conduct espionage. And some of them were kids, sort of younger than our daughter Chloe. And yet they, in full knowledge of the risks involved, would climb into a little aeroplane, a little Lysander or something, fly over occupied Europe at dead of night, jump out in a parachute, probably for the first time in their lives, land and set about spying on the Germans. I mean, it was quite extraordinary. And of course, some of them didn't make it. Some of them were picked up quite quickly or betrayed, and they knew what the consequences of being unmasked were. They would be tortured, and sometimes tortured to death or shot. And yet, nevertheless, they said yes, out of, I suppose, a sense of patriotism.
Yeah, and great courage. I mean,
Yes.
enormous courage. And maybe when you're that young, you do take risks. You're more prepared to take risks because, you're not married, you haven't got a family to protect, anything like that.
That's
but
true.
They were enormously courageous and did a huge amount of vital work to the war.
I suppose also the fact that at that time, until we only sort of won the war in the last year and a half, up until that time we were losing it. And I guess that the alternative was to be invaded by the Nazis, and things would have been awful anyway. So maybe there was a sense of backs against the wall and kind of nowhere else to go. I loved his descriptions, though, of her life in Nazi-occupied France, and particularly when she gets to Paris,
Paris, yeah.
and meets the older man that she had a crush on. when she was younger, because of course she's half French and was brought up in France. But also that central sort of spine of the thriller part of the novel in the second half, where she basically is trying to stop the Nazis from discovering the A-bomb. It was all very believable, wasn't it?
Yeah, beautifully written.
Well, did you know The Girl Who Fell from the Sky was called Trapeze in the United States? It was. More about that in a moment, and also about Simon. But of course, it's not the only book that we've been reading this summer. Here are some of your recommendations.
A book I've read that I really like, and it's almost sort of a cliche because it's such a sort of well-referenced book, and there seems to be a sort of mania for it at the moment, but The Great Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald, there's just something about his use of language in there. You can read it and read it again. Marvellous chronicle of what we now call the American dream, and the whole rags to riches thing in there, and that sort of the hollowness behind success and fame, and that veneer of Gatsby as a sort of metaphor for all those people that aspire to something, get what they want, and then sort of careful what you wish for, really. So it's one of those books that you could read again and again and always find something new in it.
Tell us about your great reads and join the debate on Facebook/Richard and Judy Book Club.
Please tell me summer's not over.
Why?
Because there's only one more cracking title from this series of the book club to go.
Not if you're listening to this on iTunes in the reverse order.
A good point, in which case, welcome to summer.
Yeah, that's more like it.
The Richard and Judy Book Club download, yours to keep. Tell us about your great reads and join the debate on Facebook/Richard and Judy Book Club.